Welcome back to the Island of Misfit Toy Collectors. It's me, Dreadnought Ryan. Yep, you're seeing it. The Love Boat has pulled into port. And I have a very special Valentine's Day gift for all of you on the Island of Misfit Toy Collectors. Love and relationships have always played an important part of nerd culture. From cartoons to movies to comics, whether it's Superman, Lois Lane, whether it was Han and Leia, whether it was the love triangle between Scott, Jean Grey, and Wolverine, it always added intrigue to the stories that we either read or watched. But with the Hasbro team, again, doing their live stream on Valentine's Day, and you know I'm a huge fan of G.I. Joe, I had to talk the best couples of G.I. Joe and Cobra. We're going to start off with some of my honorable mentions. These all came from the Sunbow era cartoon of G.I. Joe, whether it was Lifeline and Bree, Raven and Slipstream, and of course our Don Juan of G.I. Joe, Shipwreck and Mara. Bree, the wealthy socialite, fell in love with our lovable medic, and while she tried to spoil Lifeline with everything that she possibly could, he just tried to teach her that she just needed to love him. And even by the end of the episode, you could tell that her once standoffish medic was falling in love with this impulsive, beautiful young lady. Slipstream and Raven developed their relationship while trying to shoot each other down. A respect grew from that. And even at the end of the episode, when you saw how Raven was turning away from Cobra, that there was something between her and Slipstream. But probably the biggest Romeo and Juliet relationship in G.I. Joe was Shipwreck and Mara. It was his mermaid who couldn't live in the land and only in the sea thanks to genetic mutations that Cobra was working on and that they infected her with. Mara played a couple different important roles for Shipwreck, not only in the particular episode where he found her and tried to rescue her, where she rescued him, but also in the Synthoid, where in his dream he married Mara and they had a child together. This was the one relationship that I kind of always wished they developed a little bit farther along, as Shipwreck was one of those characters that I always appreciated thanks to the Sunbow series. But I think when we talk about G.I. Joe and Cobra, there's specific relationships that we all know, and some that we like, some that we don't. One particular relationship is the love triangle, depending on which version of the story you like, whether it's the Sunbow era, cartoon, or the comic. In the comic, Scarlet and Snake Eyes were always the true power couple, always being pulled apart by doing what was right for everybody else instead of just focusing on themselves. Even when they did find chances to have peace and could be together, something always seemed to pull them apart. And in the end, Snake Eyes did sacrifice himself to save not only Scarlet, but the rest of his friends. And they just never seemed to be able to find that chance to be happily ever after. With the Sunbow run, the All-American boy, Duke, and the All-American girl, Scarlet, always had the undertones of having some sort of relationship. Even when the slave girl was kissing Duke in the 5-part miniseries, you could see how Scarlet was like, I don't really care for this. But it wasn't until G.I. Joe Resolute where the cartoon Scarlet was actually forced to choose whether it was going to be Snake Eyes or Duke. And it was Duke who laid down the gauntlet for her to choose. And if you did get a chance to watch that 5-part cartoon series, you know that Scarlet did choose Duke. Personally, I always preferred the Larry Hama run, A Real American Hero, where Scarlet and Snake Eyes were together. Snake Eyes had sacrificed so much to save Scarlet in that helicopter crash, which caused him to be disfigured, as also lose his ability of speech. And it also showed her devotion to Snake Eyes by staying with him and even always thinking about him, even when he was putting himself in dangerous situations by going off into different missions. I always wish that they were able to find peace one day, right off into the sunset, and just be happy together. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Lady J and Flint, this has to be my favorite relationship from G.I. Joe. Flint, the cocky, self-assured bad boy, and Lady J, the competent, self-assured, independent woman that she was. She was the one that could bring Flint down a couple notches, and she was also the one that he could let down his guard and become the softy that Flint was. With the Sunbow cartoon, they never had to hint that there was a relationship between these two. It was an understood, whether it was going out to dinner or going over to each other's apartment, or Flint saving Lady J when she was in that Scottish castle when she found out she was related to Destro. These two were always tied together. Even in the comics, they were tied together. And I just think make an amazing couple. And if you look at different iterations of comics, you also know that Marissa Fairborn, the daughter of Lady J and Flint, was in the Transformer crossover, as well as the Transformer Collector Club, where they released a Marissa Fairborn figure as one of the Collector Club exclusives. The ultimate power couple, though, has to be Destro and the Baroness. And I know that Destro did have a relationship with Serana in the Deke cartoon series, but let's just be honest, these two go together like peanut butter and jelly. Whether they're trying to overthrow Cobra Commander or any other parts of Cobra to take control from themselves, or if they're sacrificing one another to save the love that they have together. In the comics, they ended up having a child together, as well as Destro going out of his way to ensure that the Baroness was always taken care of and rescued. Destro always chose the Baroness over everything else, and because of that, you could tell there was a real love between these two. That's why they're probably one of my favorite couples to come out of Cobra, but also I think one that you could appreciate the devotion to one another, knowing that they were having to fight everyone around them and fight to stay together. My sleeper couple, though, happens to be Serana and Mainframe. Of course, this came from the Sunbow series. It was a fun episode because one thing with Mainframe is he was kind of always a standoffish goof kind of a person. He would have the smart aleck comments, the smart aleck comebacks, but he never really showed a vulnerable side. We never really got to get more in depth into Mainframe until this particular episode. And of course, Serana, whether it was the 87 movie or any other time, sneaking in and making the Joes think that she was, either a date for Falcon in the movie or Carol, who was coming to help with the computer systems for G.I. Joe. But during this particular episode, you could honestly see that they started to fall in love with one another, knowing that it's a love that they couldn't have because they stand on the opposite sides. It's truly a Romeo and Juliet type of relationship. And at the end of the particular episode, you both see them staring up in the sky, and you know that they're thinking about one another. So again, this is the best couples of G.I. Joe. Thank you again for everyone for joining. And more importantly, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has recently subscribed, and of course, those from day one. I want to say again how much I appreciate all the kind words that you've shared with me, all the great comments that you've added, ideas for the future episodes, as well as sharing some of the list of the classified figures that you would like to see in the future as well too. This is the Island of Misfit Toys, and we will talk more than just G.I. Joe. It's just at this point, G.I. Joe has been one of the more popular items, and of course, I'm a huge G.I. Joe Dreadnought fan. So there'll be more episodes down the road too where we'll talk about different stuff. We're going to have a Marauders episode as well as a Gridiron, where we'll be talking with one of my buddies who is a 1/18th scale collector. I collect the 6-inch or the 1/12 scale, but he's always been that preferred scale of 1/18th, so he's going to show off some of the customs that he's done, as well as some of the goodies that he's gotten from our good friends over at Gridiron. But please be on the lookout for more episodes. And again, I hope you guys have a great Valentine's Day. I hope you have a great day, night, or morning, depending on where you're at in the island. But more importantly, thank you again for joining us and welcome to the island. And I'll talk to you all very soon. Thank you again for your support.